Good morning. I am Fiona Alexander Smith, the Director of Information and Communication for the Government of Montserrat. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this morning's press conference following the OECS 8th Council of Ministers of Agriculture and Fisheries meeting on Montserrat, which convened on May 17th. Thank you to the local media for attending. Just to introduce the head table, to my far left, we have the Director General of the OECS, Dr. Didicus Jules. We also have the Chair of the Council and also the Minister of Economic Development, Planning, Agriculture and Lands, Forestry, Marine Resources and Cooperatives in Grenada, Honorable Lennox Andrews, and Minister of Agriculture, Lands, Housing and the Environment here on Montserrat, Honorable Cranston Buffong. We will first start with remarks from the head table, and then we'll have questions from the press. The remarks will begin with the Chair of the Council, followed by the Minister of Agriculture here in Montserrat and the Director General.
So thank you, Chair. And I want to first of all say a very pleasant good morning to all, wherever you may be. Those of you online, as well, a pleasant good morning to you. As was indicated, my name is Lennox John Andrews. I am the Chairman of the Council of Ministers of Agriculture in the OECS, and I'm also the Minister for Agriculture and others in Grenada. I am happy to be joined by my colleague minister from Montserrat, Mr. Cranston Buffong. I like his name, and so I take my time to pronounce his name. I like his name, and I also like him as a very pleasant and welcoming personality, well equipped and well charged to carry out the work of transforming agriculture on your dear island of Montserrat. And I'm also happy to be joined by the Director General of the OECS Economic Commission, Dr. Didicus Jules. We are also joined by two staff, technical staff of the OECS Commission, Mr. Fauvier and Natasha. They provide the technical support that we as ministers need to take objective decisions relative to the development of our agricultural industry in our sub-region. So as I previously indicated, the meeting was held yesterday, the 17th of May, right here in this very same room. There were attendants from the Ministers of Agriculture, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, from St. Lucia, from Dominica, online, from Montserrat, from the British Virgin Islands, also online, and from Grenada. We also had with us the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture of Antigua, who represented the minister. And we also had senior technical officers from the respective ministries of agriculture in our sub-region. And very importantly, we were also joined by our two major partners, that is the representatives from the Food and Agricultural Organization and also from the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation Agriculture, ICA. We had two representatives from these two major partners who work with us. I also want to say to you that we had a very packed agenda before us. We had 7 major technical items for consideration and for decision making. We were able to complete our agenda in full, albeit at late hours at night, but we were not tired as such. We were all happy to be absorbed in making important objective decisions for the development of our people in this sub-region in the area of agriculture. We were also, apart from completing our agenda, we were able to set the venue and the date for our next meeting, which is going to be in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, somewhere between the 7th and the 11th. The manner in which the meeting was conducted was such that we would have received technical reports, presentations, mainly PowerPoint presentations, from our technical staff at the OECS Commission, in most cases, and they were able to provide us with the necessary details and information. And of course, after their presentation, we will ask a few questions so that we can get a better understanding and appreciation of the issues confronting and that will be for us. And based on that discussions, we were then presented with what can be described as call to action by the ministers after each presentation. So after each presentation on the respective subject matters, we made decisions. And if one thing I want to state in that conference is that as ministers, we made a number of important decisions relative to the development of our agriculture industry in our sub-region. Essentially, the meeting focused on one, if I may say, one major project that we, as a sub-region, are implementing to assist in the transformation of our sub-region. And that project, we call it the FAST, F-A-S-T. It means Food and Agriculture Systems Transformation Strategy, FAST. That project itself has a number of components. And of course, we did, in fact, focus on different components of the project, and we make decisions relative to each component of the project. But the components surround issues relative to increasing production within our islands, relative to how we go about marketing our agricultural produce, how we go about distributing our agricultural produce, transporting our agricultural produce, and an important aspect, an important component of that FAST strategy is how to get our young people involved in the agricultural sector, in the agricultural industry within our sub-region. And in this regard, as regards youth in agriculture, I just want to indicate that we took, as ministers, the major decision to have a symposium, a youth symposium on agriculture, and that is going to be held in Dominica from the 7th to the 9th of August of this year, in which we are going to invite 3 young people from each island to attend that conference and to discuss a number of areas relative to the involvement of young people in agriculture within our sub-region. We can speak more about that. We also took another major decision to have a regional Sargassum conference. That is going to be held in Grenada from September 30th to October the 1st. As we all know, the Sargassum is a major issue affecting all of our region, affecting our tourism industry, and there have been many efforts in the past geared towards how to deal with it. We will have that symposium with support from our international partners on dealing with the sargassum within our region. Obviously, my colleagues are here with me, and they are going to expand more on some of the aspects relative to the decisions that we took. But before I close, I want to just simply say that, one, we were quite impressed, we were quite happy with the arrangements that the government and people of Montserrat made to have us here. I have to say to you that we are well taken care of, right? So I said to the minister, if there is one thing I want to leave Montserrat with is how comfortable we felt and how relaxed we felt in Montserrat. I would rise every morning and I would walk the street as if I was born and bred here. And nobody interferes with me. Nobody, everybody greet me happily and smiling. And I'm thinking that when my retirement years come, I may have to find a place here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
We're happy to see how Montserrat is being transformed. The truth is that I was once the country economist for Montserrat when I served as an economist at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and I used to visit this country. That was after the volcano, almost once quarterly. And I remember the time when the country was divided into two parts, one bright and one dark. Yeah? And coming back after many years, I am so quite impressed to see the whole country in brightness and to see the greenery that characterize the whole of Montserrat, and to enjoy the peace and the calm and the friendliness that defines you as a people and as a nation. So we do feel comfortable being in Montserrat. I hope we can have another Heads of Conference meeting in Montserrat pretty soon.
I'll invite you again.
You invite us again. All right. So I will stop here for the time being, and I would invite my colleague, Minister Cranston Buffon, to make some remarks.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, the press, Madam Fiona, those watching or listening later on. Let me start by saying thanks to the OECS for accepting the invite. Over the last couple of years, we've been traveling back and forth between the different countries for these meetings. And, sometimes the population wonder, well, what comes out of these meetings? And to finally be able to host and to have the Secretariat, the Director, and of course the team here with us in Montserrat is a plus for me. So first, let me say welcome to the OECS, obviously. And I'm happy for the deliberations that have taken place over the last day and a half or so. Long beat into the night, as stated, but they were important decisions nonetheless. Everything to do with our agriculture and the way forward were discussed, especially the food and agriculture systems transformation that was stated by my colleague, Minister Mr. Andrews. Maybe on a quieter note, let me just start by saying thank you. Thank you very much for the kind words and the sentiments expressed. It is our delight to have hosted and to have welcomed you to Montserrat. We're still here. We're still open for business, as I like to say. And then, of course, for the future transformation and for the future of our agriculture sector. What he didn't say was that he brought me some nutmeg seeds. Right off the bat, me, anywhere I go, I try to see what I can bring back for the benefit of Montserrat. And he was able, I don't know how he got them through customs, but he brought us some nutmeg seeds, and we'll be propagating those at the ministry. Albeit we covered a vast number of topics, from, as I stated, food and agriculture to honey, youth in agriculture, trade possibilities between St. Vincent, Montserrat, Grenadines, wherever it is. They're big on banana and tissue culture. We'll probably talk about that later on. And I'm happy for what I see coming out of this meeting and what the people of Montserrat can expect. And of course, the OECS by extension. I'll probably leave that for the question and part of it. Let me say here up front before I forget, thanks to the Ministry of Agriculture for the work that they have put on in the background to make this a possibility. As stated by my colleague, Mr. Lennox, the team did a very good job. From protocol to security to the drivers, everything was on point and in place, and it shows what we could do in Montserrat once we continue to work together. So for that, I'm exceptionally grateful. He would have spoken of the youth in agriculture possibilities. That's a big plus for me. It was part of my budget speech. We're trying to push that side of production you would know that our farmers are aged, they're very old, no disrespect, but we have an aged group of farmers, and there must be some transition point, there must be some continuity in that sector, and we are starting with our young people. And from the opening yesterday, you would have seen that we had about 20 or so students from the MSS who were present, and I'm just happy for that collaboration and the possibilities for that sector. Honey is one I want to touch on. Miss Williams, one of our producers in Ireland, would have gone to St. Lucia, and she was awarded, I think, first prize in the honey that she carried. It shows the quality of our honey in Ireland. And working with Jeff and working with the OECS and the Secretariat, they're able now to provide some technical expertise for us and the advancement or the work with the queens. I think Miss Williams was asking, how can I get some more? Or what do we do to get them in here? And they're going to be working with us to advance that sector. Those who know, pay attention, would know that bees are very important for pollination. You're not going to have any food security without the bees, so that's one for me off the bat that I'm exceptionally happy for. I mentioned briefly trade possibilities throughout the region. The motto or the theme for this was cooperation, regional cooperation and food security. It simply means what we can do together, what items. So the same way he brought me some nutmeg seeds, I've been working with St. Vincent. Earlier we bought some pineapple seeds, some pineapple slips, very tiny slips. They're now ready to go, over 3,000 in the tissue culture farm. I don't think he mentioned it, but Dominica would have just commissioned their tissue culture facility this week or last week. Today's Sunday? Last week. So that for me is a plus, and we have our own tissue culture facility to start as well. But in the meantime, while we get that up and running, we're able to piggyback or work with Dominica and St. Vincent, especially in the planting, the bananas, and in the dasheen industry. The dasheen for St. Vincent, they've been doing really well, exporting, I believe, over 30, I think he said 80 in the meeting, Minister Saboto, to, I believe, Canada. And I'm saying we can help you with that production. We can work with you to fill that extra maybe 100 pounds, 100,000 pounds that you can provide. And that's what this meeting was about. How can we work together as a region? I even gave the example of the Maroons back in the day who would go from house to house or fixing one problem with a homeowner and then come to you the next. Same thing we're doing through the OECS. How can we collaborate? How can we work together for the advancement of agriculture and food security? Given, of course, our mandate to reduce the import by 25%, and we're on our way. Thank you very much. Again, to the Secretariat, thank you for accepting the invite and for being here. And like I said, you would understand why we are vested in Montserrat. It took us some while and the challenges to get you to Montserrat, travel arrangements, flight. Dominica couldn't make it, my good colleague down there. So now that you're here, you would have understood, like I said, why we're here and why we're dedicated to Montserrat and its development going forward. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Jules, the Secretary, Natasha, the rest of the team, you guys. Mr. Lynch, he'll be working with us throughout the rest of this year for the development of our plantain and banana industry. I'll leave it there for now, and I'll take questions later on, I'm sure. Dr. Jules, is it? Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to echo the deep appreciation expressed by our chairman, Honorable Andrews, and to thank the government and people of Montserrat for their hospitality. In fact, when by the time we were a couple hours there, we thought perhaps Montserrat had mistaken this meeting for a heads of government meeting. Such was the quality of protocol and assistance that we were given. At the opening reception, I made the point that this meeting of Ministers of Agriculture would have been we expected it to be the most consequential of the 8 meetings we have held so far. This was the 8th meeting of the Council of Ministers of Agriculture because of the nature of the decisions that had to be made at that time. There clearly were a number of decisions that had to be taken, and these were not decisions relating to more paperwork and research and so on, but really decisions for implementation and to advance initiatives already underway. So it was a meeting where ministers received reports on what was happening and made decisions in order to further these initiatives to bring them to a state of fruition. Both Minister Lennox and Minister Buffon have spoken to some of the initiatives that are the practical things. For example, Minister Buffon spoke about the honey initiative. I can say that within, literally, in fact, as soon as the ministry is ready to receive them, a two-person team from St. Lucia, from the Jeff program, as well as the Caribbean Association of Beekeepers, are ready to come into Montserrat to do a comprehensive assessment of your bee stock, as well as the conditions of the industry, and also to look at providing immediate on-the-spot guidance, some training for your beekeepers, and essentially to help put whatever can be put in place immediately to activate that. But importantly, to look at how do we further support Montserrat, given the unique nature of your honey, so that this can become a thriving niche industry in Montserrat. The other key thing I want to point out is that this meeting, although it is a meeting of ministers of agriculture, and all of that is embedded in the FAST strategy, it is not just about agriculture. We are not looking at agriculture as just planting and reaping stuff. We're looking at agriculture in its broadest sense and in its most interconnected sense with other areas of life and livelihood. So, for example, issues of environmental sustainability. It's not about clearing large swaths of Montserrat to plant, whether it's yams or bananas or potatoes. We have to do this in a manner that sustains the forestry, but at the same time optimizes food production. We actually have a concept in the OECS, what we call the ridge to reef. So looking at the island as a full ecosystem, starting from the highest mountain peak right down to the reefs in the sea, all of these things have to be treated with diligence and care so that all the initiatives we do preserve, protect, and give us the greatest benefit from nature's bounty. We looked at areas of climate change. We looked at education because, again, agriculture in schools. How many people are interested in doing CXC agriculture? Even those who are not minded to do agriculture, what about school clubs in agriculture, getting young people acquainted? The Youth in Agriculture initiative is a whole initiative by itself. Then health and nutrition, the intersection of agriculture with healthy foods, literally banning the use of pesticides and ensuring that everything we grow is good for our bodies and for our growth. The question of livelihoods and business, the blue economy. So fishing is not neglected. In fact, one of the initiatives that we have well on the way now is the plans to build a conch hatchery in Union Island in the Grenadines that will help to restore the stock of conch, which is, as you know, is a very lucrative seafood right now, and to do so in a manner that is sustainable. The critical thing about that is that we are working with CITES, which is the Convention on the Protection of Endangered Species, so that working with them, it means from the start we have the accreditation, and anything that we harvest of those conchs will be certified and allowed to be exported internationally. So this gives you a sense of this is not just about agriculture, it's about, better living in these islands. It is about our health, it is about our livelihoods, it is about our future and the engagement of young people in agriculture in what should be a viable and profitable industry in a world that is becoming increasingly uncertain and chaotic. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Didicus Jules, Director General of the OECS. At this point, the floor is now open to questions from the press. We just ask that when you ask your first question, you say your name and the media house you represent. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vinaya Bass from 664 Connect Media. Thank you so much for coming to Montserrat and hosting the meeting here. We hope that you have a fantastic time. So my first question is for Dr. Jules. Given the fact that the OECS's commitment to the FAST strategy is in response to CARICOM's goal to reduce food imports by 25% by 2025, is that timeline still realistic? And if so, how does the strategy plan to ensure urgent and sustainable implementation in the face of climate change and natural disasters?
Well, let me say, first of all, that the FAST strategy, in a sense, was a bit of a precursor to the 25 by 25, and it is very well aligned to that. The challenge for us is to ensure that in the rollout of the CARICOM strategy, that we define our niche opportunities very clearly. And also we look to ensure that our farmers are not disadvantaged in the broader thrust to ensure food security across the Caribbean. So we want to ensure, as countries like Guyana, the bigger countries, Suriname, we told even Brazil, there are going to be arrangements for food security with them, which we welcome. We want to ensure too that our small farmers are not cut out of the market because these larger entities are able to produce faster, bigger, cheaper. And so the distinction between production in the OECS and production within the wider CARICOM region requires some division of labor and specialization. We do, however, know that in the OECS there are certain products that we have that are unique to us. So, for example, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, arrowroot, Grenada nutmeg, all of these, in each island you can identify these unique products. And so we want to ensure that these products retain their niche areas, even the honey that we spoke about at Montserrat, so that we can make this a viable industry and the wider Caribbean market can be open to that as well. But the primary thing about the FAST is to ensure food security for our population, given what is happening in the world today. And by ensuring food security, we will also secure livelihoods in agriculture.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my second question is, during your speech yesterday, you emphasized that the FAST strategy will be built from the bottom up. Can you elaborate on how farmers and industry insiders will be involved in the decision-making and implementation processes? That's for Dr. Jules again.
Well, we have had consultations with different farmer groups, especially where associations exist. So you will see that the ministries will be doing their utmost to encourage formation of producer groups and farmer organizations and so on, because it's important to have an organized voice. One of the things that we don't appreciate in the Caribbean, it's easy for everybody, as we say colloquially, to run their mouth about something. But running your mouth is different from organizing yourself so that you have a voice at the table. What we've done, and which we will be doing in the case of the agriculture ministers, is to ensure that these farmer groups have a seat at the table in future meetings of the ministerials, so that way they can come to the ministerial with their own proposals on areas of improvement, suggestions they have on how we can accelerate and improve things so that the ministers can make decisions based on that. This has worked very successfully for us in other spaces. So, for example, we had our last education meeting, ministers' meeting in Antigua and Barbuda. The minister invited students, the presidents and vice presidents of all the student councils in Antigua and Barbuda to attend the meeting. And they sat in an outer circle of the meeting. And not only did they, it wasn't just the opening ceremony, they sat in throughout the meeting. And at one point, the chairman asked them whether they had any input to make in the matter being discussed. And they were reluctant and shy at first, but once the first three of them asked questions, they took over the meeting more than the ministers. So it was a floodgate. And that was a positive thing because it gets young people involved, engaged, and they understand that their voice matters at the highest level. The ministers are listening to them. So, and our communications plan around the FAST is also being designed in a way that it is not just about talking to people, but it is also about listening to what they have to say. So you will find that working with Minister Buffon and Minister Lennox and the other ministers, we will be having and working with them to have town hall meetings in the respective countries at a grassroots level to hear from farmers, and to do so not in a blanket way, but in a carefully defined sectoral manner. So I already said about the beekeepers, people coming into Montserrat. When they come, they will be meeting and sitting with the beekeepers of Montserrat. And then anybody associated with the bee trade will be another level of discussion with them as well. right? So in every sector, we do that in a systematic way to hear from them. Actually, this morning, I just got a call from a young guy, 22 years old, from Grenada, who has developed what we call a chat bot, which is the use of artificial intelligence to answer questions. And he's designed that chatbot so that our OECS website, when you go on the website in the future, it will come up and say, can I help you? And instead of having a human person answer your question, any question you ask, it will answer the question for you. And it will refer you to the links in the website to see the information you require. Now that's really critical because it will take some time to learn the questions and so on, but we're going to be really quizzing it, and all of us will be playing with it to get it familiarized with the information. So that too will now solve a lot of problems. You cannot imagine sometimes. I got a call at midnight one night from a group of people who were stranded in Trinidad and Tobago because their flight was diverted to Trinidad, and they were trying to come back to their respective OECS countries. And Trinidad and Tobago would not allow some of them to board the flight because they didn't have passports. Now, in the OECS, you can travel with an ID or any government-issued picture ID. And because they had these IDs, but they didn't have a passport, they were going to be stranded in Trinidad. So we had to quickly make contact, explain to the airline, which we already done, inform them, but had to explain to them that these people have the right to travel. They're coming back home. What are you going to do? Keep them in Trinidad?
Thank you.
Good morning, Malika Mackenzie Weeks, Alugana Express News. You've mentioned about FAST so much. What is the timeline for the implementation phases of FAST from the foundation laying to the full operational stage? And that question goes to Dr. Jules.
I'll dump in all the questions.
Yes.
Yeah, technical question. Actually, there is no ultimate timeline. And the reason I'm saying that is that we starting with the low-hanging fruit. FAST is a strategy, so there's an objective. There are indicators as to when we achieve this objective. But the intention, as the acronym suggests, is to move with fast as possible. So every opportunity we get, and we have actually a work plan for 2024-25 for FAST. So we are now putting in place the institutional connections and arrangements as well as the funding arrangements that will help to speed things up. So the pace thereafter will depend on how fast we can mobilize the resources. We have already commitments from IECA and FAO. We signed an agreement with IECA, for example, with about 15 or 20 areas of collaboration, some of which are ready to roll. So it's as fast as our capacity can handle.
So this is the message, taking the pressure off Dr. Jules a little bit. So a question, for Honourable Lennox Andrews. As the new chair, how do you plan to ensure that the decisions and strategies discussed at this meeting, or the meeting that took place yesterday, are effectively implemented across all of the member states?
So thank you, and I'm extremely happy for this question, because yesterday, in addressing the opening ceremony, I made the point that as ministers, we normally assemble, meet, we discuss, make decisions, and then we return to our respective homelands, and we don't implement those decisions. And yesterday, I made the point that if there is one important message that must come from this meeting, is the commitment of all of our ministers when we return to our respective homelands to do what we have to do, to implement the decisions that were taken here. So we agreed on this. In fact, in my closing words as chairman yesterday, I reiterated that point. I called on all of our ministers present and online for that agreement. And we have all agreed. In fact, there are some specifics that each minister has to do to ensure that certain projects are implemented. So, for example, there are some legal matters that were sent from the OECS Commission to our respective islands for action. We agreed that when we go back, we're going to check with our Ministry of Legal Affairs to make sure that they received it and to make sure that they put a plan in place to have these matters implemented, taken to the Cabinet, and then taken to the Parliament for decision-making. So we have committed ourselves to not just talking, but to implementing. And we want to implement with alacrity. We must get it done fast. In fact, that's what fast really means. Things have to be done quickly. And we stress on that because we are of the opinion that our people elected us to serve them. And we are serving them through projects, through programs, through policies that are all geared towards improving the conditions of their lives. Our philosophy and our thinking is that the longer we take to implement these projects, the longer we take to improve the lives of our people. The faster we implement these plans and projects and programs, the faster we improve the lives of our people. So we have to act with alacrity. We have to move fast. Yeah? And I was quite happy that as ministers, we recognize the importance of taking our work seriously in that regard and committing ourselves to doing what we have to do, getting more involved in our respective ministries. We have to go down on the ground, put it that way, in our respective ministries, talk to our staff, be directly involved, and give them the work to do, and follow up to make sure that they get the work done. Yeah? And that's the approach we are taking, and that's the vibes with which we left that meeting yesterday, to go and get the work done. And in that regard, we pledge to give our support to our technical staff at the OECS Commission. We are of the opinion that the OECS Commission staff is quite capable. We have a team of intelligent, committed, bright, young graduates from our region. They understand the issues. They know the issues. And they were able to present the issues to us in a manner that was simple for us to understand, keep us well informed, so that we can make objective, impartial, and realistic and pragmatic decisions. Yeah? And I really want to commend them. Mr. Jules and his team, Dr. Jules and his team, I want to commend them for the quality of the work and of the quality of the presentation that they gave to us yesterday. Right? We are fully satisfied that they are the best possible team that we could put together within our region at this point in time to work for us, to help build our region and to implement the plans and projects that we have for our region transformation. And so we will be in contact with them as much as possible. They have pledged to keep us updated on the developments that are taking place, right? And so that we can be informed. So coming out of that meeting also, therefore, there was a desire and a need for a much stronger working relationship with ministers and the OECS staff. And of course, Dr. Jules alluded to what we will do in that regard. And we remain committed as such.
So just as a quick follow-up, so these meetings are on an annual basis. Are you going to have like a subcommittee or working group, maybe on a quarterly basis, that's meeting to make sure that all of the decisions and actions that came out of the meeting are followed up?
Well, each meeting is going to provide an update on the decisions that were taken at the previous meetings, right? In some cases, there was need to form subcommittees to act much faster so that things can be done much faster so we can report. And in other cases, the commission itself took up the responsibility to do what has to be done, good, and to provide us with updates when we meet at our next meeting. And I suppose Dr. Jules can, in fact, expand on that.
Yeah, I just wanted, the chairman was indicating that formally we expected to have meetings at least once a year. But we have an agreement in all portfolios that we can meet at any time. So, for example, when COVID hit, our heads of government at one point were meeting every week using Zoom. So, but the face-to-face in-country meetings, at least once a year, as circumstances require, we can meet more often. We have also, in this particular case, there are at least, coming out of the conclusions of this meeting, I can remember at least 2 meetings that we are pledged to have in less than the coming months. One is a meeting on having to do with, I'm trying to recall now, the parametric insurance, parametric insurance. Because of the problem of drought, St. Lucia, for example, has declared a water scarcity national emergency. And even while we were at the airport coming in, we spoke to the head of CRIF, the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Facility, about the need for him to have a discussion on the extension of the parametric insurance so that it would cover that area of agriculture. There's already instruments that cover agriculture. So that's one takeaway. There'll be a meeting called on Zoom with all the relevant parties just to discuss that single agenda item. And that's a model that we use. So we don't need to wait for a formal meeting of the ministers. We can convene a meeting of ministers and their respective technical officers on any matter at any time, once they agree, by Zoom.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Honorable Lennox, you mentioned youth in agriculture, and I must say that was a theme for yesterday's in the different speeches. How does the Youth in Agriculture Symposium aim to engage and empower young agricultural scientists, and what long-term impact are expected from this initiative?
So that's a technical question. And I sometimes prefer to, I may speak from a political point of view, but this is highly technical. I could say to you, for example, that when we discussed the Youth in Agriculture Symposium in Dominica in August, Natasha, who is responsible for the planning and the implementation of that particular exercise, provided us with some initial ideas as regards how the symposium would be conducted. And we also shared with her and her team our own ideas on how it should be conducted in terms of what are the possible topics for discussion. And some of them are, in fact, geared towards fulfilling the questions that you ask, in terms of how we can get our young people more involved in agriculture. My personal view is that I feel strongly that agriculture, first of all, for me, agriculture is a science. Yeah, agriculture is a science. And to encourage our young people to get involved in agriculture, we must describe them as agricultural scientists, and not just as farmers. So what we want to create is a cadre of agricultural scientists actively involved in the science of agriculture and actively involved in real agricultural practices. Yeah, we ask that, for example, the issue of science, the application of science and technology to agriculture, that should be one of the matters for discussion. There should be a topic and there should be a presentation on that one, the application of science and technology to agriculture, so that the young people, as scientific as their minds are, would come to the realization that this thing is not just about cutlass and fork and hoe, working in the hot sun all day long. You know, it's about the application of technology to agriculture. So that's one of the things that we said to them, that there should be a presentation on the application of science and technology. Another issue that we raised that they should consider for the symposium is the issue of how young people should go about, teach them how to write project proposals to get financing for the agricultural ideas, for the agricultural projects that they have in mind. Good. And there will be a number of qualified, well-trained experts from the region who will be joining them. We will want for the symposium to be widely broadcasted throughout the region, so that it should be online, as they say, so that those who are in the other countries who can't be there physically can register and also be part of the discussion. As ministers, we were also encouraged, if we have the time, to be present at the symposium, because one gets the sense that a young person would feel motivated, would feel encouraged to get involved in that industry if he has his minister by his side and if he has his minister's support. So we are all encouraged to be present. I mean, time permitting, we are all very busy, but the longevity of our industry lies with the active participation of our young people, and the more support we can give to them, the best it is. But I suppose I can ask Natasha to expand a bit, because she's the one who is...
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Chair, I think you have really captured and answered the question. And if I may just add that the symposium really would be touching on innovation and technology in agriculture. We're also going to be, as Chair did mention, the aspect of proposal writing. We're also going to have the financial institutions on there, and mainly the young persons would be coming up with a plan which would be presented at a town hall meeting for the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, who would be hosting this segment, along with the Director General and other ministers who would be present. So you literally get the views of the young persons, what they're interested in, and how they see their future in the agriculture sector, and not only as a farmer, but actually as a business.
You mentioned financial institutions, and we know that this is in Dominica. Do you plan to engage the OECS financial institutions, or just because
it would be the institutions from the OECS? We are also bringing in experts from across the OECS and not only from Dominica. So the involvement of the youth, coaches, mentors, business persons, and other farmers would be from across the OECS, because we also would be having older farmers to share the experiences and to mentor those persons. So it would be an OECS symposium and not just Dominica. Yes, it will be hosted in Dominica, but it would be across the OECS, including the French territories, sorry.
Thank you. Minister, I'm still on you, Honorable Lennox. You mentioned EU-funded initiatives. Could you provide more details on the EU-funded initiatives, particularly the EDF 11 program and the Agriculture Insurance Initiative?
So that one again is a technical one. I will pass it over to my technical expert.
Yeah, that really was not fair to the minister, because he doesn't receive the EU funds. The EU funding is what is part of the 11th EDF, as you rightly indicated, and it covers a range of areas, but the essence of the 11th EDF is accelerating regional integration. So the funding is divided into different pots that address different aspects of deepening regional integration. And we've allocated some of that money towards this the OECS FAST program. So, for example, some of the training that we need to undertake, any certain consultancies that need to be done. Like, for example, we use some of that money to do value chain analysis on certain products in the OECS to see what is them, to test their market viability. And beyond just the production of the crop, how we get value added. So take, for example, Vincentian arrowroot. How do we process it better and market it as a finished product? Because it's one thing to send arrowroot tubers abroad. Or even if we take, for example, in the case of Grenada, Grenada has a very lucrative trade in mangoes right now. I was in New York and saw one of the large Grenada, I think it's a Bombay mango, that was being sold for $5 in a supermarket. Now, imagine the cost of a raw mango is $5, but imagine if Grenada is able to produce mango chunks and then export that as organic mango chunks. The value is exponentially higher. So that's what we use in the EU funding for.
Good morning, everybody. Bennett Roach. He's not been around for quite a while, and he's getting back into action. And I was quite impressed yesterday with the presentations that came from the ministers. But I saw out of it quite a few problems. And the first one that I want to tackle or see if we can get some answer to, because from that also stem other issues, and it's the issue of transportation, which I suspect had to do with the fact that some of our neighboring islands, I didn't quite get those other ministers who were here. Who were they? From where?
So we had the Minister of Agriculture from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Minister of Agriculture from St. Lucia,
Right.
the Minister of Agriculture from Dominica, he was online, the Minister of Agriculture from your homeland, Montserrat, the Minister of Agriculture from Grenada, and you also had the Minister of Agriculture from the BVI, who was also online.
And so, yes, and you said these were online. St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua.
And Antigua was represented by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture.
On island here?
On Ireland, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You see, I am thinking that some of the issues that we could have had with people not being here physically is transportation. Would that be a fair statement to make? And
yes, the Minister for Dominica, for example, he indicated that he made every effort to be physically present here, but the transport got the better of him. So that's why he had to be online. Yes.
yes, I couldn't go to a bridge tournament in Guadeloupe because it was so expensive to get there. You had to go to St. Martin and someplace else and then get there, which included overnighting to get just, I can blow on Guadeloupe from here. And so that creates a problem. Now, that also takes me to the situation where you just talked about mangoes from Grenada going to the US. And I see in the UK, not just mangoes, but a lot of vegetables and so on, but not from the region here. And I don't think, I'm looking around and I don't think there's anybody who remember the 50s when we used to send, was it bananas? And that was a very popular thing going to the UK. Where does that stand now? Are we shipping bananas still to the UK? And
Yeah, if I can respond, because I get your drift, and I think you put your finger on a very sensitive button, because the issue of transportation is at the core, whether we talk in air or sea transportation, is at the core of some of the challenges that we face. And frankly, our heads of government at that level have been very preoccupied with it. We have had in the last 6 months, probably about 7 or 8 meetings of the heads and face-to-face meetings trying to resolve and discuss this issue. But it's a complex issue, and again, some of it is being muddled by what appears in the media, because every now and then you hear an announcement that some new ferry service is about to start. And in fact, it's just it's an intention, but it's not a program that is developed, that is planned, that is funded. So people recognizing the opportunity, a lot of people, private sector people, are making announcements as if, look forward, this is coming. It's like whetting the appetite of people more, but what is actually happening is frustrating people more. Because if you're going to pre-announce something that you haven't even properly configured, you're only causing more frustration. Now, what we have been doing at the OECS, especially on the sea transport front, there are some things we're very clear about. It's very easy to go to some big multinational and say, we need a ferry service. And they're going to come in and put a ferry service, easy run-ins. However, the challenge with that is that traditionally, you mentioned the 50s, we have had these sloops that have been running from island to island, not carrying large quantities, but being able to bring vegetables, fruits to the BVI, different countries. You put in one of these modern ferry fleets that carry vehicles, passengers, goods, and they instantly going to wipe out these locals from the market. So the challenge there for us, as we shape and put in place the economic union, is that we have to ensure that our own local indigenous business people, and in this case shippers, are not left out of the market. Now, we've made many attempts to bring these guys together. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies. We had a meeting, we tried for about 6 months to bring the shippers together, with following up on an idea originated by Sir Dwight Venner, that a company would be established, and each person, like if you have a boat worth $1 million and she has a boat that's $2 million, your assets are put into the company. It's not taken over. You retain the ownership of your boat, but it becomes part of the asset pool. And your shares in that company is commensurate with the value of the asset that you bring in. So in that way, if there's a very lucrative run between, say, Antigua and St. Vincent, everybody is going on that route. No, we ensure that all of the assets together are properly scheduled, so we have a regular service properly scheduled across the entire geography of the OECS. At the end of the year, when you declare your profits, everybody gets their value according to their shareholding. So these are some of the initiatives. And right at this point where we are is trying to bring those shippers again together to see how we can get them to begin to reorganize themselves in a better way so that we can at least, as small as it may be, get the shipping going. Additionally, because of the presence of Martinique and Guadeloupe in the OECS, we have Express des Îles, which, by the way, has just been bought over by another company. It does the run from Guadeloupe to Dominica to Martinique to St. Lucia. We have tried since Hurricane Maria to get them to extend as far north as the BVI. And once you reach the BVI, because the BVI has its own cluster of islands, the indigenous shippers can plug into that loop. And as far south as Grenada, or at least as far south as St. Vincent, because St. Vincent is a multi-island state as well, and they have their own internal shipping arrangements. So once we cover these two nodes, with Express des Îles as a backbone, we can service the whole OECS region. And we've already indicated to the center signal to the new owners that we want to have that discussion, and we will see what happens from there. But it's not an easy thing to resolve. As simple as the solution appears, there are a lot of, cost involved. The challenge with bringing in a foreign investor who says that they can do everything for you, we are small islands with small business size. If after 2 years these people decide for the investment, the returns are not worth it, they move out. And then you're going to be in a worse position than when you started, because you got accustomed now to the service, and businesses would have developed and flourished around that service, and then the withdrawal of it now is like you're off life support.
Thank you very much. And I suppose the same argument can apply to air transportation, yes. So I'm hoping that we can get to work on that. I'm hoping, and you refer to Dwight Venner, and he, of course, comes to mind very much so because he had been very interested in passionate about getting our transportation going, because I think that can make a difference between transporting our local vegetables even. I think of mangoes. I don't know, we are small, but if anybody can see the amount of mangoes right now, which just drop on the roadside for the mango trees on the roadside, you can imagine what is happening in the bushes and so on. And I wonder, why can't we
Well, that's
connect
something
on
we've
that?
been discussing with the young people already. I went to a village called Foasaw in St. Lucia up north, and we were asking again the point about listening to young people. What is your aspiration? What would you like to do? And their thing is like, look at the mangoes wasting. We'd like to do something about that. A packet of Dole mango chunks in Marseille in St. Lucia is 40 EC dollars. Now, if you're able to collect these mangoes in a sanitary condition, sanitize, dice, and bag them, vacuum seal, refrigerate,
Yeah.
I reckon you can produce one of these packages for probably about 10 or 15 EC dollars. Now, you're not going to go to Marseille and say, you're selling the imported thing for 40 bucks, so therefore I can give it to you at 15 or 20. No, if the market is already at 40 bucks and people are buying it, then you say, okay, I will give it to you for, say, 25, and you can still have the same markup you had on the dole, right? But it means the youths, the farmers, get more out of it for the value added. So these are the things that we are trying our best to put in place. And it takes some persuading, but our governments are certainly aligned to that, and they're fully supportive.
Thank you. I come to our Montserrat situation and funding. Maybe I can ask you, what kind of funding do we get to the OECS? How we get our funding to the OECS? You know, CARICOM gets its funding. Oh, there is something as well that you mentioned, and it also has to do with the transportation in some kind of ways. But I was shocked to hear that, but not surprised, about the fate of those people. Well, not the fate, but the inconvenience that they suffered landing in Trinidad on IDs and not being able to get out of there because they didn't have passports. What's the situation between OECS members are mostly CARICOM members as well, am I correct? So how could we have that kind of a disparity?
Well, it's not a disparity, it's just a bureaucratic, bureaucratic and administrative systems are foul-ups all the time. I mean, when we put the regime in place, all the airlines were informed. We send the documentation to them. So it's a matter, I guess, of in the transmission in a particular airline company and with the immigration officials, it wasn't done. One of the things we've done to ensure that certainly within the OECS, everybody is clear about these protocols, is that we have run training programs for immigration officials so that they know how people are to be treated. And it has worked for us in the OECS. After Hurricane Maria, there was something like about 20,000 Dominicans who had to leave because everything was destroyed. They didn't even have passports or picture IDs. You know how we identify them? By their accent. No, seriously. And at the airports, we put web cameras, and there was a form. Do you remember your grandfather's name? As much detail on your family background as you could recall. Put it in the form so at least we have a record that later on we can go back and trace, right? And then some of these people are still, these Dominicans are still living in other Caribbean islands and settled. Their children are at school. They enjoy the rights of every citizen.
Okay, thanks. I know we are now under pressure for timing, so some of you can go enjoy yourselves and leave the island. Funding, I was asking, what funding do we get from outside? From the Inter-American days and the different places and so on for our different projects and that sort of thing?
I can take this question quickly. We are now doing our triennium budget, work plan and budget plan for the OECS at the Commission. The triennium, that's the next 3 years period, is $250 million. Now, don't get frightened. This is not money coming from our governments, right? Only about 30% of that budget comes from the governments as subventions paid to us. But the rest is grant financing that we mobilize externally.
That's what I'm really interested in.
And we've set up a department in the OECS Commission called the DCRM, Development Cooperation and Resource Mobilization Unit. And they've been doing a fantastic job in mobilizing resources from all sources. The presence of Martinique and Guadeloupe has helped us a lot because they are able to mobilize resources through a variety of French instruments, such as a group called the Agence Française de Développement, AFD, that has been able to, we do projects together with Martinique and Guadeloupe, submit it, we get EU funding, more EU funding than would normally be accessible to us because of Martinique and Guadeloupe's presence. So we are aggressively looking to source funding. My objective as the head of the OECS is to reach a point where for every dollar that the governments give us as subventions, we are able to show them that in Montserrat, in Grenada, in St. Vincent, for every dollar you give us, this is what you get in return being spent in your member state or benefiting your member state, right? So if we reach a point of 5 to 1, 1 to 10, the higher that ratio goes, the better for us.
Okay, so finally, I reached to our minister's comment where he talked about the barriers that we have, and then he mentioned the ones that dictate that because I'm British, meaning that we are British, and this has been long going. I've attended many situations where I've had this question as to why we can't benefit. You get something from EU, for example, right now, I'm not so sure, but it used to be that we couldn't access the funding that came to, like the OECS and so on. And I'm seeing from what the minister had raised there, that this is still going on. And I'm wondering, is it our fault? Because, let me make this statement here, because we are British, and the British says, well, no, you don't have to give anything to little impoverished Montserrat, how it must be that we can put some pressure on the British and say, we were due to get $1 from X place. We shouldn't have to beg you for it, or we shouldn't have to, we should be demanding it from you. We shouldn't even have to demand it. We should just
let me take that question because I think I have more immunity than your minister does, to speak right by it. The challenge here is that since Brexit, we've had challenges, right? Well, first of all, let me say, what the problem you're raising here is not unique to the British Overseas Territories. It's also faced by other independent states in the OECS, like Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Vincent and St. Kitts and Nevis. Because the World Bank, for example, uses this graduation formula. So if your GDP per capita is considered high and high income, you don't get this. And I mean, some of that is really a specious statistic, because if you look, for example, at the BVI, anybody who, because Sir Richard Branson, for example, is a belonger now in the BVI, if you factor his wealth into the GDP of the BVI, it will make everybody in the BVI look like they're a millionaire. But is that the reality? It's not. So these are battles that we are constantly fighting, saying to the World Bank that we need to change this, we need to look at a vulnerability index and all of that. Aside from that now, in the case of the British Overseas Territories, the matter is even compounded. Because before, for example, when we had a project with the World Bank, BVI and the other BOTs, we can't fund them, they can't participate in the project. We still build them into the plans for the project. But in the past, we would approach DFID, which was the British Department for International Development, and say, we're running this project, say in education, we need support, we need to include the BOTs. DFID would provide us with funding to ensure their participation. When Britain was still part of the EU, they benefited also from EU funding. With Brexit, and that has nothing to do with the government of the BVI, of Montserrat or the BVI. Once Brexit happened, it's like, well, you no longer can access European funding because obviously the Europeans consider you left Brexit, you did your Brexit, so that's not our problem. The BOTs are your territories, you find the funding for them. Right? So it's a very complicated thing, and we've been discussing that with the British High Commission and trying to find ways of ensuring that the BOTs are not left out. But one assurance I can give you is that we are resolutely in solidarity with the BOTs. We had the second meeting just a couple months ago of the OECS, of the heads of government of the associate member states. So that is the BOTs as well as Martinique and Guadeloupe, to find out from them, how can we in the OECS make your membership more meaningful to you, and how can we be of better service, and how can we work together to continue to fight that battle for equity of treatment within the OECS construct.
So I just wanted to ask you one question. You mentioned the importance of the affordability in food security during your speech yesterday. What strategies are being implemented in Montserrat and throughout the OECS member states to ensure that the food that is produced is not only nutritious but also affordable for all citizens?
That's a very good question. Thank you. The issue of affordability is a very concerning one for everyone, especially in the OECS and in Montserrat as well. There's no point putting all this work in if you cannot afford it. Subsidies. There was a conversation we had yesterday about WTO and their approach in terms of trade with the overseas territories, with the region, and whether or not they will look at us in a way that we can be a part of that market. They have not done anything about that for over 20 years. So they're still subsidizing their farmers on the developed world, and there's no way we can compete with that from this end. This is why government, well, my ministry especially, have been continuing to subsidize our farmers, subsidize our fishers, subsidize our producers in every possible way, even though we can't benefit from some of the initiatives because of our status. We have been finding unique ways through the OECS. Some things I wouldn't say here today, but we've been finding unique ways for us to be able to benefit. I spoke about the bee situation before, even through Jeff and the provision of small grants for farmers to get up. The other issue we have in terms of affordability, startup costs are very expensive, especially around the conversation with young people and youth and getting into farming. And this is where providing these subsidies, providing these assistance, we can aim to lower the cost of their production, and then that can then pass on to the consumer. In cases where our ministry provided most of the subsidy, we would have set the prices by which they can sell, just to make sure that that transfers to the consumer on the other end. We must remember too that farming is a business. We must also remember too that nutritious food, organic food, is not cheap. It's the hardest to produce, and therefore we must be prepared to pay a cost. But we keep asking for that partnership. We keep asking for that relationship with the farmer, that when we put these implements in, they can then, in turn, pass it on to the consumer. So it's a continuous process with the help of the OECS, obviously, and with government subsidies. That's the way we've been trying to bring down the cost of production. Even in my local context, with our water subsidy, we're providing over $100,000 a year to farmers so that they don't have to worry about irrigation. So you can bring down that cost and then transfer it onto the farmers. The other thing we need to remember too is that from our end, we import almost everything, including the equipment, the irrigation, everything, and that cost is there. There's very little we could do about it from this end. We've already reduced or removed all of the duties on agricultural feed, that sort of stuff, just to make sure that it then passes on to the consumer at the final end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just one question for you, because, I mean, I'm going to track you down for more. But your involvement with the students, really, really good. Not that just that they were there, but they were a part of what was happening. Usually we invite them and they're seated in the audience. What is the significance of involving the students in agricultural events and initiatives, and what are the expected outcomes in such engagements?
We cannot do anything as a government or as a country without the involvement of our youth. It's just that simple. Throughout the region, throughout the OECS, throughout CARICOM, our farmers are very aged. And the only way you can have a replacement of that is to work with our young people. We have a youth in agriculture program within the ministry already set up and geared to go. We have already ordered all the material at the secondary school to replace the existing greenhouse systems that are there. And we have to continue to engage them. Like I said, there's no way a young person can get up tomorrow and start farming. They do not have the implements, they do not have the resources. So is making it so that they can first to get in and then to continue to farm afterwards or continue to produce. And as I think my colleague here said, is to make it a science, make it so that the prestige that's associated with some of the other jobs transfers to farming. I think it was the statement I made in my speech where the world's economies and countries would depend on farming and food production. It is just that simple. We are not going to be here 10, 15, 20 years to come without food and food production. And our young people are the ones who will carry that forward. So involving them at an early stage is key. And that's why we brought them here yesterday. That's why I gave them the little packet of seeds and things, just to encourage them and to get them started on some type of production, be it beekeeping, be it fisheries, be it horticulture, be it agriculture, just to have them involved in farming.
There are a number of good things coming out of this conference. One is that there is a clear commitment on the part of the ministers to work together and to take a sub-regional approach towards the development of our agricultural sector within our region. What we are doing is that we are trying to implement similar projects in all of the islands as a basis for increasing our domestic production, our regional production. And what I got yesterday was a sense that all ministers are prepared to support each other and to support the FAST program that we are implementing, because we see it as a major project that can transform our region and that requires the active involvement of all of our ministers. And I get that commitment from our ministers. The other comment I want to make is that if there is one industry that can transform lives and can eradicate poverty and can improve living standards, that industry is agriculture. Not because it is simple as science, but also because agriculture has a very strong linkage with the rest of the sectors in the economy. So it is linked to our health. It is linked to tourism. It is linked, any other sector you could think of, agriculture has that very, very strong linkage. And therefore, if we seek to develop our agriculture properly in a holistic way, what we are in fact doing is that we are developing the economy as a whole, and that the whole country and everybody would benefit from that sector. The first, to continue with the question that I think you asked the minister. Agriculture can solve many of the problems that confront us in this region. The shortages, for example, the supply side shocks that we receive from external shocks, the high prices that we see for many of our products. The solution to these things lies precisely in production. We have to work and produce. The more we produce, the more we have for sale, the more you put onto the market. When supply increases, as they say in economics, when supply increases, prices fall. When prices fall, people can buy more. Good. When you buy more, you improve your living standards. When you buy more, the businessman benefits. Yeah? But also, when you produce plenty, nobody got thief. So pretty larceny problem that we experience in our region can be solved through increased production. Yeah? So I sometimes ask this very simple question. Why it is that diamond, which is not a necessity of life, is so expensive, but water, which is an essential necessity of life, is so much cheaper? And the answer is that water is found everywhere. Water is plentiful. So when things are plentiful, they are cheap. And therefore, if you can produce plenty within our region, then prices will come down. We will have more to consume, and our living standard will rise. And I think that's what we want to do with our FAST program: produce more, distribute better, market better, and earn a better living for all of our peoples. Thank you.
I crave your indulgence for just maybe 1 minute. And this is the topic. I think agriculture, the ministries are linked to fisheries, and we haven't heard that word mentioned. You did, he did.
And it's not me mentioned, it was an integral part of the discussion.
Yes.
The blue economy. That's, I mentioned
The what? The what?
The blue economy.
The
It's all about
blue
fisheries.
economy.
Yes. And I spoke
Okay.
about the reef to ridge, right? And the Conch project.
Yes, I remember that, and I noted that as well. So you're saying that has been taken into the whole consideration. Didn't hear much about it, and I know when I leave here today, before I reach home, I'm going to hear somebody say, "But you're not saying about fisheries."
No, yesterday, the ministers received a report on what we are doing with the blue economy within our region. Good, we got a report from our technical people. So that too was discussed yesterday.
Okay, very good.
I could probably start with Mr. Roach's last point about the fishery sector. One of the things that the OECS is working on is the sanitary and phytosanitary standards for the fishery sector. And that came out over the last days, and we did say that. So we're working with them, and you've seen the work that we're doing.
Those are two big words I just heard there.
To deal with that. Just the conditions around the whole industry and everything. And one of the things that's in our CPREG 2 program is a fisheries center, a place for transforming the fish from the sea to the plate, the next step between. That's what happens between there, and we need one of those. But just to deal with that. For me, it's the partnership. It's the collaborations that came out over the last couple of days with the ministers across the region and what we're looking forward to in the next couple of days. The future production in Montserrat to include technology, to include the digital side of things to make them more efficient and to increase production. And in doing so, providing an income. Now, I mentioned earlier the conversations with St. Vincent and what they're doing. And it brings me to the idea of tissue culture and our own facility that will be built here. Some time ago, I gave out well over, I think, very close to 2,000 planting slips in a program within the ministry. But that have its own issues. So the next step up from that is a tissue culture facility. Now, St. Vincent's got one, Dominica just started theirs, and we're next up in line. We have the designs already, we have the site, the location, so a lot of things to come in that arena where you can mass produce thousands of slips in a short time. The only way we can get into the planting or the banana industry for export is to have a lot of it, and to have it in a clean and sanitary, disease-free environment. I spoke to the element of trade. All we want here in Montserrat is one product, any one commodity that's bought overseas, be it plantain, be it dasheen. St. Vincent's on there already, and we've had those conversations with the minister in terms of how we can get into that side of things to add to or something that we can export. ICA, Jeff, these institutions that are there to provide assistance, be it technical or be it funding, be it grants, we're keyed up or we're waiting and to see how we can benefit from that going forward. We mentioned the youth and the agriculture and the startups and the issues with that. And for me, that's key over the next couple of days. To your point of the mangoes, Mr. Roach, agro-processing is the next key. And as Dr. Joe said, adding value to that commodity, be it slices or puree. And we have already gone out, since in government, done our agro-processing work with CDB. We have identified the site already. We have a design. It's just the funding and the next steps. We already found the market engagement. We already have the products already from the same puree, jams, jellies, vegetable bags, and chips and gluten-free flour. Plantain, breadfruit, flour, you get the drift. So we're working. We've been at it for quite some time, and it's the next step for us. And the FAST strategy would help us get to the next phase of production on Montserrat. Over the last 3 years, we have done a lot of groundwork in getting us to a point now that we could produce, from irrigation to the establishment of a pest management team, to the reinstatement of our agricultural pound. I know we've gone off, and as I said, it's a political thing afterwards, but we have been doing the work, and we're happy for the collaboration with the OECS, and we'll continue to work very close with them for the advancement of agriculture, fisheries, and of course apiculture and horticulture, as it's a part of that industry as well. And just on a point of, a little humor, a young man was very concerned about our bees on Montserrat, and he wrote, yes, this is not the one that we're on the production side as with Miss Williams, but the wild ones. And I'm happy for the announcement that we're having some people to come and look at what's going on there and whether or not it's something serious for us to look at. Once again, thank you guys for coming. Thank you again to the OECS, protocol staff, security, driving, that whole aspect that made this possible. Thank you very much.